This meeting is being recorded.
Veronica, thank you. Our meeting is just getting started and my heart is already very full. I welcome all the folks back with us who were at the Fellowship of the Spirit conference last week. We still had a meeting here and it was a great one and I'm grateful. And tonight those who are giving our lead share for this group especially don't need an introduction. I would say two veterans to this meeting, but I think it's better to say two seasoned beginners in this program. And I know you all came because this meeting means so much, but especially because these two folks mean so much. So I'm going to turn it to Mary and to Missy to lead us for tonight.
Okay, Miss, you want to start?
Thank you, Chris. Do you want me to go, Mary? You want to go?
Well, maybe we should, some people don't know who we are, so maybe you could kind of do a recap on why the two of us are doing this.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Missy Donahoe, and I am an alcoholic. Hi. And Chris, thank you for your kind words. That was very nice. Mary and I have been together since we were 6 years old. Little girls together back in New England, sort of rocking and rolling around the world. And it's amazing, really, that we were just talking about that today. We've had quite a journey because we're in our, I guess we call us elder years now. But when I got sober, I think Mary, you might have had about 6 years ahead of me, and she had just moved to Maine about a year before I got sober. And I've often thought, in this program over the years, that everything I seem to go through is always in preparation for something else. Something always happens down the road after I experience something. So when she moved to Maine about a year before I got sober, I was very happy, but I was still drinking, and it was not a good situation when she would call me and say that she was coming to visit, because I was certainly at the end of my drinking at that time, but I didn't know that. And I would actually, it was exhausting, to be honest with you. I had to stop my drinking like at least 24 hours ahead of time so that I could get, sort of whatever I had to get going, so I could sit and talk with my old friend, because I hadn't seen her for a number of years. She had gotten sober out in California. And it was very, very difficult for me to not drink for that particular day and to sit with my friend who loved me enough to never say a word about my drinking. And I didn't drink when she was with me, but it was horrible. So anyway, the day came when I did get sober, I think it was about 6 months later. And I called her in Maine and I told her that I was an alcoholic, like that was something new to her. And she said very kindly, yes. She said, I've been waiting for you. And I said, okay. I knew nothing about AA other than what I had heard over the years, from various people, but, wasn't terribly interested in it at that time. But I was very desperate. I had hit a real bottom and I said, would you sponsor me? And she said, she paused. She said, I really don't want to do that. And that was very curious to me. I mean, she's my friend from childhood. And I said, well, I don't like any of these women around here. And she said, I don't want to sponsor you. And I said, well, why wouldn't you want to sponsor me? I don't understand that. And she said, because if I sponsor you, I'm going to have to tell you the truth about yourself, probably. And I may say things that might hurt you or offend you. And I don't want to lose you as a friend. Now, I didn't take that in. I didn't understand what that was at that time. And I assured her, I said, oh, no, we'll be friends. Don't worry about that. Well, there were many times, believe me, that I was happy to see her go back to Maine after a weekend with me, sober. But over the years, we have really walked this path very much together. And my gosh, we've done retreats together for the past God, Mary, what, 25 years at least.
At least.
And yeah, amazing. And walks this path. She's ahead of me. She's been my sponsor for years, and we sort of co-sponsor each other these days. But if there's anything coming down the pike at me emotionally, I'm very quick to pick up that phone, and and talk to her about how I should proceed. And thank God I do that now. I never used to in the beginning. I was glad she went back to me many times because I was totally in control, I thought. So anyway, there did come a day when she told me that she wasn't going to pat me on the back. She said, "This is a deadly illness. It will kill you. And I'm not going to ever not tell you the truth, because if I pat you on the back," she said, "I will be patting you right into the grave." So I'm very grateful for those words and those tools that she used on me. And but it was difficult because and very humbling, which I'll get into a little bit later. But I think, when in Bill's story, when in Bill's letter here, he talks about being 17 years old when he got sober. I really identify with that. I was in my mid-30s. I had had a wreckage of a tremendous past of drinking since I was a teenager, and a lot of wreckage of that past, 2 children dragging through all of that, single mother, the whole 9 yards. The path I was on was just very destructive. So there was a lot to do. And I didn't know how to even start, except to sit in the halls, not drink for one day, shake it out. I didn't go to rehab, and I didn't drink. But I'm grateful for the fact that I had her in my life. And I also heard what she had to say many, many times, and wanted what she had. So here we are. Anything you want to say, Mayor?
Yeah, it's been how do I want to say this? When I got sober, I did get sober in California in September of 73. And I really was blessed, because I feel as though I came in and I sat at the feet of the many heroes that were at that time. Chuck C was still alive and talking all the time. There was some heavyweight, good AA that was there. And I was influenced by probably the best sponsors in the world. And along with that, my husband's sponsor was a man by the name of Larry Blake, who definitely did not pat you into the grave. And I'm grateful for that. So I was brought into the program by people that worked from the big book right off the bat. So it wasn't a point where I wasn't in a literature meeting. My sponsor always had me in a big book meeting or a 12 and 12 once a week. And so I had to be in a literature meeting. I think that's a good base that I received at that time. When I moved at 5 years of sobriety back to New England, I thought I had gone to another planet. I didn't know what was happening there. 98% of the time where I was in Maine, I was the oldest member in a meeting, I was 5 years sober, for God's sakes. And it was the scariest thing I ever went through. And I would call Beverly and I would say, Beverly, I don't know what's happening. Why are they selling the big book for profit? What's happening? It was just crazy things that were happening. And she gave me direction. She said, this is not a popularity contest. You know how to stay sober. Start a meeting. And so I did start a meeting in that town that's still going on 40 something years later here. But it was a big book meeting. And I remember my experience with this. And I think that's where I want to kind of go with it. Missy got pulled into this because I just needed Missy as a friend, as well as with the sponsor. No matter what I was learning, that one had to hear it. And that's pretty much what went on. But I remember I went through the big book. I remember about 3 times, and we read the first 164 pages. And then I heard something about the third year that shifted me. And And I kind of want to just share this because I had this experience happen when I was invited to bring the big book to the Faroe Islands, which is some islands in the middle of the North Atlantic between Denmark and Iceland. And Heather, who's on here now, is doing a book study with them and bringing it to them. And gradually I'm watching the same thing that I watched when I went to Maine. What happened was that there was a gentleman that had gone through the first 164 pages with me. And how I do the big book is that I do it slowly. I don't read a whole chapter. I read maybe a page or two, and then we talk about what the black line said and how it affects me or doesn't affect me. And I did this for 3 years, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I just didn't know. And then one day this guy said, you know this line here? I experienced this with it. I almost fell off the chair right there, because what happened is that he didn't tell me his theory. He told me his experience. And that's a shift for me. And that's how I try to work this program and how I try to go through life. I'm a seasoned beginner. Missy's a seasoned beginner because we had never before been in our late 70s. We won't say any more about that, Missy, although you are older than I am. It's too bad, but there you are. Anyway, what we have realized is the things we had when we were in our 30s are not the things that we're dealing with when we're in our 70s. And if I am dealing with my reaction or my response to a situation that I addressed when I was 40, I'm definitely, if I was still doing that, I'd be drunk. The road gets narrower and the horizon gets broader. I was just talking to Don C. I think I saw your name up here, Don. Hi, thank you for this morning. But he kind of phrased it this way, and I think it's true. Not consciously, but unconsciously, I developed survival skills in recovery. I developed how I was supposed to be in recovery because I was dependent on people, and I watched them and they did this, so I should do this. And so the first 20 years of my recovery were intellectual. And I think that's how we're all taught how to learn things, is to go to school and get a degree and get the knowledge, and then we're just great. And unfortunately, I did all of that. And I realized that intellectually, I had an intellectual response to things instead of one that came from my heart. Because you see, when we come in here, we're broken people, very broken people. And I was very broken. And I had to develop survival skills within this program. I didn't know that consciously. I never knew anything until later. But I realized that I had like a pocket God. If something happened, I can pick up the phone and call Missy. I can pick up the phone and call my sponsor. I can go to a certain meeting. All of these things were like to make me feel as all is okay. All of them are very valid. They're all very valid. But then one day I really heard what the book said. It says that we claim spiritual progress. It does not say we gain intellectual knowledge in ways to hide and not expose ourselves to some presence that's present. And I didn't know how to attach to that at all. So I suppose tonight, Missy read something this morning. Why don't you read whatever it was? Because we can come off of that, I think, don't you? Where are you, Missy? I can't even see you now.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So yes. Missy and I were talking about this because I can go into different areas. I mean, one of the things, and you've heard my talk before, most of you, so big deal. But you know that one of the areas is just like Missy, we were single parents. We did not know how to be parents. So about 5 years of sobriety, bigamy, I want to be a parent. Now she's what? She was 10, so she was 15 years old. So now I'm going to be a parent. Well, just because I'm going to do that doesn't mean I'm going to be allowed in as one. So I had a lot of ideas on how to be a parent until I came across this prayer and a lot of ups and downs in that area as a parent that said, God, make me the parent you want me to be, not the one I think I should be. That was the first time I realized I was attached or dependent on what Spock said or somebody on how to raise somebody. And of course, we're the most abnormal people in the world. How could we? One time, my daughter and myself and her father did some kind of a video about restoring the family fabric or something. At the very end of it, I just love what she said. She said, you know, we're not the Waltons here. And I said, right, you know, we just are not that. So how I've had to grow in that, I continue. I'm a seasoned beginner because my child is not 10 years old anymore. And how am I supposed to be the mother I'm supposed to be if I have an agenda on what I think it should look like? What has happened is that God has shown me that she has a God. And whatever she has to do, I can walk beside her. Now, I think that's a response versus a reacting to where she is and whatever's going on in her life. So that area is growth. Missy, the same way. She had stepkids. You should have seen a maniac running, hiding in her car and doing these things to manipulate one of her stepkids. I said, what are you doing? And then we finally looked at that and we saw how that is. So what I'm trying to say is, I think we go through necessary suffering for us to give up our ego on thinking we know what the answer is. And Missy, read that thing and see if we can bounce off of it, if you would, please.
Sure. It comes out of Richard Rohr, who I love. And maybe a lot of you have this book. It's The Immortal Diamond. And I was looking at it today.
You're muted,
Sorry, I
Missy.
don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
Did you hear anything I said? No.
Right again.
Okay. It comes out of Richard Rohr's book, The Immortal Diamond, which is all about the false self. So I just happened to see this early on, and he writes, if a person keeps growing, his or her various false selves usually die in exposure to greater light. I said, whoa, I love that. You know, when I first hooked up with Mary back in the day when I got sober, she introduced me to a lot of things that she was doing at that time. And I was very, very new. I mean, within a week or two, she said, you got to get this book. You got to read this. And it was Emmett Fox that I started with, Sermon on the Mount, Around the Year, which is a calendar thing it's a great book. I still have it. Then I went into the Thomas Mertens, which I didn't really understand back then. I went into Father Keating. Then I went into Cambridge and had my auras read and my crystal. I mean, I was searching every single way to try to get this connection and feel comfortable. I was very uncomfortable sober. It was horrible. I was in my mid-30s and I was catapulted back to probably 15 years old. I was terrified. So these books and this new light I was getting was all in my head, was all intellectual. I was reading it, but I was getting comfort from it. And it was sort of like the little seed that was planted. And when Veronica, you were reading so eloquently, I love to listen to you read beautifully. This last page in this letter of Bill's, I underlined it because this is so me. He says, it is most clear that the real current can't flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken and broken at depth. And I had so many dependencies. I could Zoom with you guys till midnight tonight and tell you about all of that. But the biggest one, I think, that I have really worked hard up until, well, I'm going to be very honest, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm 43 years sober today, which means that I am a seasoned beginner. It was about finances. Being a single mother, I don't know if that went into my cells somewhere about always coming from a place of lack. Anytime I had fear, which was constant, I was going to be ending up in some, homeless shelter as a bag lady on the streets. I mean, I went right down that rabbit hole over and over again. So my dependencies were at the time, for a very long time, on my family. My siblings, 3 of them, a sister and 2 brothers, became extremely successful in their careers. I, on the other hand, am like paycheck to paycheck, sober with these 2 little kids I'm trying to support and get sober at the same time. And Oh my God. They would take me on their little vacations. I felt like the little ragged person. I was the oldest of the four, and I had I was alcoholic, and I chose this path of destruction. And when I got sober, I was very angry and resentful that I figured out, why can't they just help me do something? I never asked. I was too afraid. I was too prideful. We were away once up in Canada, actually, the four of us, and we're having breakfast one morning, and I said something. I started to cry at the table, which was nice. And I was maybe 15 years sober, maybe at the time. I'm trying to think. And they're all looking at me. They're trying to have breakfast, and I'm crying because the manipulation in me came out. And I never saw that really, except that's what I did. That was my mode of operation. And I would cry and say things were really tight. I was really having a hard time. I didn't know if I could pay the rent. And my sister looked at me and she said, well, you made your own bed. Why don't you lie in it? So that just really wasn't a good thing. But these were the things that I was doing. Now, I was married at the time to my wonderful husband. We were both sober, and I just had this huge fear that was constantly on me. And I was dependent on so many of these things. And, I would pray and pray and pray and pray and pray, but I was praying to something that was out there and up here and around there. And it was all intellectual in my head, and it wasn't inside my heart, and it wasn't inside of me. And it only took banging my head against a cement wall over and over and over again until things really started to fall apart, and I had to take a look at it. And it is necessary suffering that Mary mentioned. Father Rowe talks about it. His book, Underwater Breathing, is or Breathing Underwater, rather, is the 12 steps on a spiritual basis. And everything I had to go through in this program and not drink, oh my God, not drink brought me to where I am today. And I really depended on so many people. And there were so many other things that I don't have time tonight to go into, but that was a big one, a very big one. And Mary, go ahead if you want to jump into that Father Rohr thing that I read.
Yeah, I think what happened for Missy and I is that when about 25 years ago, so close to when I was about in my early 20s, I was asked to start facilitating 12-step retreats. And so I didn't want to do that. And the only thing I knew was the book. And so I said to Missy, come do this with me. And I thought you only have to do anything once. Well, it's not what happened. We've done these things sometimes 2 or 3 times a year or whatever. But what happened was, if you want to get emotionally sober, I think the 12 steps are the best tools in the whole wide world. Because, if you can, and I look at the steps, and Missy and I do the steps once a year. I do it once a year. I take something that has been, I use page 52, and I ask the questions, the bedevilment questions, a little differently. I just say, God, have you brought me as far as you can in regard to personal relationships? And I stop. And immediately there's like a thought that goes, God, I hope not, because what about XYZ over here? And, about my emotional nature, my a prey to misery and depression. The areas that I'm a prey to misery and depression, I take a look at that. So I ask the questions that way. Every year we go through and bring one thing through. I've been just amazed at what is uncovered with that. I don't have a big agenda about anything. Sometimes I know what I have to do in the trail. Most of the time now, I'm not too sure. But remember, we're driven by 100 forms of self-delusion as well as fear. And a lot of times I'm deluded at what I'm really blocking. And so that question of, has God brought me as far as he can in regard to personal relationships, has been a gift, because there'll be like a little shadow that'll go by. What about this? Oh, I don't care about. What about? And thank God I follow whatever that voice is saying to me. And so I started to bring one thing through the 12 steps, because on page, what is it, 13 and 42, it says that spiritual principles will solve all your problems, not just your drink problem, but all these problems that cause us emotional pain and upheaval. And so, so I started to do that. And as we went through this year after year, Missy and I started, and we did it. When I do my workshops, if you were all here, you'd all be bringing something through, okay? But Missy and I bring something through, and then we demonstrate it, and we give you time to bring things through. Now, during this process, little did I know that, that God heard my prayer to set aside everything I know and everything I think I know, so I can have a new experience with God. And so I didn't know that my relationship with my Creator was being enhanced or enlarged as I went. All of you know that I finally had to do these steps at 20 years with a feeling that what I was doing the presence had to have the qualities of Missy and my friendship. That much I did know, because when it said in Bill's story, we had to turn all things into your newfound friend. I know what it feels like to have a friend. I've had a friend that just her being on here, I'm just fine. What I don't do, she'll do, and vice versa. It doesn't make any difference. But there isn't anything that I'm afraid to go to Missy with. There isn't anything that I've done in my life that woman doesn't know, and I think the same, vice versa. And so there's no fear involved with saying where I am. And that could be that I'm pissed, ass mad, or anything else. She doesn't judge me, nothing. When I went through the dark night of my soul at about 32 years, it was her constant support with me as I was in the fetal position, sobbing, and some information I received from Don Coyes that saved me through that. And I realized that today, but it was such intense pain that I had to go through as my ego died to my belief structure. I had a belief structure on what would make me safe. You know, when you have some time, you think you know something. Forget it, folks. You know, I'm a season. I ask this of Gary every time. Gary, have you arrived yet? And Gary has informed me that he hasn't arrived yet, and he has more time than I have. And so I think this is a limitless load, and I have to be open enough to be able to receive what that presence wants. I have to realize that this is a limitless load, as it says on 129. It's going to continue to pay me dividends for the rest of my life, as long as I mine it for the rest of my life, do this thing with Missy year after year after year, and insist on giving the whole thing away. And that is going to open you to another presence that's going to come deep from within inside of you. It's not going to come outside, but you will start to experience a feeling of the presence. And that's what she and I did as we did these. The first workshop we ever did, we're going to plan what we're going to do. We got together every time. We never figured out what the hell we were going to do. So we both arrived, sat down, and I said, well, I guess we'll look at the book. And I did something, she did something, and then didn't we? So, God, that's done. So for 25 years or more, we have never looked at what we're going to do. We have trusted a part within our souls to give us whatever we need to carry through. That left us free and open to feel the presence and to receive the presence. Now, if I had an agenda on how something was supposed to go, I'd have gone out of my mind. Have you ever done that? Have you ever said, well, when I get there, he'll say this, she'll say that, I'll say that, she'll say this. And then nothing like that ever happens. And so I was wasting all this time in my being, listening to something that wants to make me safe all the time, that is really a false persona in itself. I think it has to do with my ego. So as we did this over and over and over again, the one thing that I want to cement, because it was the one thing that you don't want to rest on your laurels with information or intellectual enlightenment after a fifth step, and take your intellectual enlightenment that you've received on what you've been up to, do a half-ass 6th and 7th step, right, and then go out to save the world, because now you know what you were up to, and you think because of your self-sufficiency you can do different. You'll be back on your ass in no time. I sponsored enough to know that. I've tried to tell people over and over again, this is not about intellectual enlightenment. When you go through a fifth step, you will know what you've been up to. If you've done an honest fifth step. Now, when I do my sixth and seventh step, and I can remember doing it with Missy at one of those retreats, I said, oh God, I hope you're there, for God's sakes. If not, I'm screwed. But I am going to sit here with you on this, and I am going to admit what this is about. And I remember that it was that, doing that, and the willingness to wait on the Lord. And then I received two principles that you cannot manufacture. Nobody can give them to you. You've got to earn them. And I believe that is forgiveness and compassion. For me, when I come out of a seventh step, I have a feeling, not an intellectual, rational, logical thing, about compassion and forgiveness for myself as well as whoever else was involved. And it is only at that time that I proceed with my eighth and ninth step. I don't have any power before that. I will be doing it intellectually, mechanically. I will be doing something instead of from my heart. That is the beginning. Your sixth and seventh step is the beginning of cementing your second and third step. When you come to believe in something and you make that decision, when you get to step 6, are you entirely ready for that, God? Entirely ready for God? If so, you have to be humbled in order to humbly ask. Hence, that's necessary suffering. That means your ego is going to die. Your ego is very mad at that. Let me tell you that. It's had you for a long time. It's not going to be happy. So you are going to go through some necessary suffering. But if you know that there's light on the other side of that, my sponsor used to say it this way. She used to say, hang onto your ass with both hands and shake it out. She's on the other side of that pain, you'll be closer to God. And that's exactly what I can tell you from my experience that's happened. It's not an intellectual thing. It's something that happens inside. And I was talking about it recently. Missy, jump in if you want. But I remember when I first started to realize there was some presence that was present. There was something going on because it was too much of a coincidence. In New England, they call it a God incident. And that's true. It was like, there's no reason, rationale, or logic that something happened. So I knew something was going on. So I had like a little thread that connected to this thing inside, deep down inside of me. And as the years have gone on, I've built that relationship or that foundation within, because that's where you're going to go for the final analysis. That's where it's going to be found. And I built that thread became a string, and then the string became like a thick piece of yarn. And it's gone on through the years till now. It's kind of like the, I don't know, anchor rope that I just roped around my porch down in Florida. It's solid. And when when you throw an anchor down and you have a mooring for a boat, that keeps you solid right there. Doesn't mean I don't swing around it. And sometimes the winds come up and try to pull me off it, but I can tighten those lines and I'm closer to that presence. So that's what I think the journey is. I think it's an internal journey. I think we have the spiritual tools in this program that are profound, that we are now hitting all over the world, all over the world. It's not just at thoughts where we see people from out of country. Every meeting now is an international meeting. Do you know that? Somebody's probably here from some other country. And so this is being shared, and we're going into countries that aren't even supposed to have any light, but we're in there. And that happened so quickly, so quickly. God used all of these technical people in this world when that pandemic hit. Boom, I never missed a meeting, and off we go. And we've been now in people's lives all over the place. Emotional sobriety. I don't know if I'm emotionally sober or not. I know that I don't react as much as I used to react. I know that I've learned how to respond. I don't think that I did it. I think it's the 10th step promise. I think it's because not only did I do the inventory in the 6th and 7th step, the 8th and 9th step, but Don Coyce, when I called him and I was crazy as hell, he said to me, when was the last time you did the work? I said, I've done it. He said, have you made all your amends? I had one amend that I had not finished. I said, I have one. He said, do it. Didn't even ask me what it was. Didn't make any difference. I did it. And then from that, I've now entered the world of the spirit. Hear me on that. If you hear nothing else, when you walk into the 10th step, you never are alone again, unless you want to not speak to that spirit. I mean, it'd be like being here and never talking to anybody, just talking to my own self-sufficiency. And so we go from there. As you go on, and it's on the last sentence in To the Agnostics, as you draw closer to God, he, Shem, whatever you want to call it, the presence will reveal themselves to you. You will absolutely expect. That's just not for me. That is not just for me. That's for every single one of us. It's the best promise there is. So as you continue to draw closer to that deep down inside of every man, woman, and child, that means we're going to search diligently within. Only if you wish, then you can join us on the broad highway, page 55. And then that line, as you draw closer, he will be revealed. And because I believe my presence, the thing that I have come to believe in is that my God is bigger than Missy, even though she's my best friend. She does things. She used to have a husband. She'd do things with or whatever she's doing. So she can't be there all the time. So I had to get that essence to be with me as I wake up in the morning and talk to it and go from there. That's where I am, Miss. Take over.
Okay. I'm not going to talk too long, but I do want to wrap up the fact that I was able to do some step work around my fear of lack, poverty, no God in that, very agnostic in that area, obviously, and was able to work that through. Did a 5th with you, sat for 6 and 7. And then I waited to see what God was going to do. And every time I've done a step after my probably 12th year of sobriety, going forward to where we are now, where I am now, I have waited. And there will come a time, I don't know when that happens. Could be a week, it could be 6 months. I feel a shift. And things within me, it's all internal. I feel compassion for the person I've harmed or the situation. And I remember my sister's comment, which was very mean. Well, you made your bed, lie in it, And I realized around that she was sick and tired of hearing me whine and complain about why I couldn't get a handout from my family, right? So I picked up the phone after that and talked to my brother, made an amends to him. And I said, I'm going to be fine. I'm very sorry that I put this on you. Very, very sorry. And I sincerely meant that right from my heart. And I did the same with her. And since then, things that I've never expected have flowed to me. Some from them, some from other areas. And I have what happened, and this is one experience. I've had many, many 4th steps over my dependencies on other things, which of course we don't have time for tonight. But I have begun to be led, really led within my soul as my ego dies. I'm being led by soul and spirit as my ego has died to all of its pretenses, every damn bit of them, and I'm so grateful for that. I am so grateful for that. And it goes on and on and on. And, one quick thing, and then I'm going to wrap this up for myself. When my husband died 4 years ago, the love of my life, boy, was I tested. I did everything in my power to keep him alive, everything. And of course, I didn't realize that I didn't have any control over that. And I thought if I prayed hard enough that maybe some miracle would occur. Well, it wasn't to be, and he died. And I was absolutely bereft. He was a sober man. He was a good man. He was very well thought of in the AA community. His funeral was like a state event. It was just an amazing testament to this program. But what happened was that I had to find a God. I was so out of my mind when the reality hit that he was really never coming back here on this plane, for sure, that I had to trust in a wisdom that was greater than my own. And I have spent the last 4 years doing that. And COVID is a horrible, horrible thing. And many people died. But when that lockdown happened for me, I think people were concerned about me because I had just lost my husband. But it was a very good time for me to be alone with myself, with my higher power, and to read my books and to start to really get deep inside of myself. And, serenity, people have said, is not the end of the storm, but it's peace within the storm. And that's where I am today. And I go to God today with everything. I went to God tonight about this meeting. I said, I don't know. I used to be all filled with that in the old days. Say the right thing, figure it out. What am I going to do? I hope they like me. Oh my God. I just said, God, take it, use me as an instrument. Mary and I, we have our own experiences. That's the only thing I can give all you people tonight is my own experience, my strength and my hope. I love this program. And you know what? I remember a gal that Mary and I knew very well up in Maine. One night she said, this program is not a one-walk dog. I loved it. It's not a one-walk dog. We don't take our dog out and walk him once for the rest of his life. That's what I feel like. This is on and on and on till I take my last breath on this earth. I am going to be working, because when something comes down the pike that I've never experienced, I know now what to go to. Okay, so thank you so much for me tonight. Thank you, Mary. And thank everybody. It's been great.
Thanks, Miss. We'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Oh my goodness. I don't have any words, so I'm going to turn it over to everyone in this meeting in a few minutes. Would love to open it up and hear from all of you. But first, let's give Missy and Mary a chance to call on a few friends.
Ooh,
Miss, go ahead.
who do I see that are friends? How about Juanita? I love Juanita.
Hi, Missy. Thank you. And thanks, MT. Boy, I just want to cry. I really do. I just want to weep, It's
Oh,
like the minute I heard you call my name, I just wanted to cry. I love you guys so much. It's unbelievable. I think that's one of the things that you were talking about in the beginning, how we have these survival skills in recovery. And not for me, I have this one survival skill that is in recovery, but it's a holdover from the days before. And it's this thing of keep that heart shut, keep it closed. And people like you and Mary Fair don't let me do that. You just don't let me do it. I hate that. I mean, I hate you guys for that, and I love you with all my heart because of that. And this time of year is really hard. And Missy, you weren't at FOTS in Colorado. Mary Thayer was. A lot of people on this meeting were, and it's a hard time for me. It's like my anniversary is July 2nd, and it's been 36 years that I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting. And I wish my anniversary were like some other time, I was talking to Don over the weekend. He goes, yeah, well, here's winter and here's winter. And then it's like winter all over the place, and it's like a time to go deeper. And I had a hard time at FOTS. I really did. Not the whole time, but off and on, I had this hard time because I would look at people and I think, man, look at all these people. They are such good friends. They love seeing each other. They're laughing. And I wanted to just hide. I really did. There's a part of me that just wanted to hide and not be around anybody, you know, and I did a bit, you know. And then there's that little thing in my mind that goes, well, if only you were like them. If only you were gregarious and outgoing. If only, you know, it's like they do it so easily. That wouldn't be me. You know, it's not me. And at the same time, I love seeing everybody. And I feel like I'm a broken record in this. And I sound like a broken record, but the truth is that I keep going deeper. I keep going deeper. And I keep opening up myself to love more, to care more, and to receive more. And I think this time of the year, it's like, I never know, man, if like the slot machine's gonna pay, and this time I'm gonna be wide open, or it's gonna be half open, or it's gonna be like, I'll peek out of the door every once in a while and see you and say hi, you know, and I'll sneak back in, you know. And you were saying that we have these false selves that die when exposed to the greater light. And I think that's part of what happens to me this time of year. And I think it's part of this emotional dependency thing that you guys are talking about. You know, there's that part of me that has to die, continuously die. And I wish it would die at another time of year rather than now, because I'd like to go to Fellowship of the Spirit and look good, for Christ's sake, you know? I mean, my heavens, you know, and that's just not the way it's supposed to be, you know? So, and that's not to say I don't love it and I don't love seeing everybody, but I just love you too. I love you from the bottom of my heart and with every fiber of my being. Thank you.
Love you too, Juanita. Thanks.
How about, you know, one of the gifts that I learned from Don P., who's all, we have to mention our Don P. every once in a while. He came to Maine one time and he and his wife were there, and he was giving this workshop, and he introduced his wife, Jackie, to everybody and asked her to stand up. And after everybody applauded and sat down, he said something very profound that has helped me with a lot as I grow in this program. And that is, he said, you know, it's a funny thing. Every morning I wake up and I look over at my wife and I figure I want to know what God did with her overnight. And I thought that was such a profound thing, because, you know, I realized that when I haven't seen someone for a year, God's been working with you. I want to know what the heck God's done with you through the year. So that means that I have to every once in a while listen. And I had that opportunity over the weekend. And this woman, I can see a lot of God has done something with her. And I'd like to hear from Kate R.
Thank you, Mary Thayer. You know, I could listen to you and Missy for a long time together, and yeah, I had a different experience at FOTS this year. You know, I was sort of pitching more than I was catching, and I think for me, what I loved about what you shared, Mary Thayer, is, you know, I can see how much you've shed over the years, you know, of your growth. And what's become really, really apparent to me over the last year, but more particularly even over the last several months, is a real clarity in seeing that everything I have done in my life to protect myself from being hurt has hurt me.
Nice.
And seeing, and I feel like everywhere I turn right now, I've been taught to really, when you start to look at this stuff, pay attention to what's going on in your present life right now. And I'm seeing, it feels like, it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. You know, it's like you hit something and then something else pops up over here. And I can really see how, like Juanita was talking, my efforts out of self-reliance to protect my heart from being hurt has hurt me, and it's showing up in so many different forms. and how it's prevented me from actually having a lot of the things in my life that my heart actually really wants. And so I think I'm almost in a space of openness, where I've got this awareness and I can feel that things are really shifting, but they haven't shifted yet. And so I don't know, I woke up on Sunday morning of FOTS and I was doing my prayer and meditation, and I was sitting somewhere and the sun was starting to rise, and it was a little bit of a metaphor for me of a new day's dawning. A new day's dawning. And like you said, Mary Thayer, to have that compassion for who I have been and an understanding of why, but then really realizing that we don't have to stay that wounded bird. So I love you so much. And I love the relationship that you have with Missy, and I just love who you are and always get so much from your sharing. So thanks, Mary Thayer.
Thanks, Kate. Why don't we open this up? Who wants to speak?
Great, thank you. Thank you both. If you just raise your hand digitally, raise your hand, I'll be able to see who's in line, and we'll call on you one by one. I think you've left us speechless. All right, Maria S., we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, my name is Maria and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everyone. I just want to thank you both, Missy and Mary, for sharing. I just admire and love what a long relationship you've had, and such a loving relationship. It's just so beautiful. And I love to hear both of you share. It's just very inspiring, and it gives me a lot of hope. I also wanted to say, Juanita, I don't really know you, but I'm going to tell you, I love you. You just shared something that I experienced, and this past weekend was a tremendous learning opportunity, a painful one, but it just opened my eyes. I was, the book says that dependencies have to be cut away. And there was a major shift that happens because of and their old survival skills that no longer work for me, because it interferes with, me having a happy and fulfilling life, especially in personal relationships. And so I have these ideas of that everybody, or especially if they're close to me, that they should have the same belief system or the same morals, or they should show up the way I show up, and they should provide, and give the way and when they don't, it hurt me, but at the same time, it really woke me up, because there was nothing wrong. Nobody did anything wrong. No one did anything wrong. There was no right, there was no wrong. I was able to look at me and my expectation and my dependency, and go inward and go to God, and be able to, just walk around and meet new people and be engaging. And I now was okay to the best of my ability, because I had a little altitude sickness, but it was just a major lesson that because I am, the other dependent, and I just saw that, I don't need to be doing this. I don't need that to be okay with who I am. I can go off and, be okay and meet new people. And God gave me the strength to do that. My norm is, wait on me, let me tag along with you. you know? And so it was just a major shift. It was really beautiful. And I just wanted to share that. And I'm just grateful for this program, and I'm grateful for you all. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. Sam, would love to hear from you.
Man, what a great share. And it's always, I'm Sam, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm so glad that y'all agreed to talk tonight. And what I have is a question, or I'd like to hear you elaborate on the God of your experience, right? And you talk about, like, at 20 years sober, you had to get a bigger God. And, Bob Bazant used to always talk about that, psychoanalysis is the religion of our day. Right now, we live in a really secular culture, right? So there's one view that would say, oh, that's great. They've made up this psychological trick, that they've made up this friend, or they endow this mental characteristic with something, and it brings them some comfort, right? Like, that's good that it's worked for you, and you keep having to make up this kind of psychological crutch. Or we're living on a plane of inspiration, and it really is a power. And so I'd like to hear about some of your experience at kind of coming and becoming more absolutely, I don't want to ramble, but I'd like to hear more about kind of your interaction with that power, and how it shows up for you. And if you feel like it's just a mental exercise, or if it's a real thing that shows up, do you feel like you get inspiration? So with that, I'll be quiet. Thanks.
Miss, do you want to answer? Or do you want me?
Yeah, I can. Sam, it's just really been a process for me from the very beginning. As I've grown in this program and become more aware that perhaps there is something bigger than me. It was kind of like a discipline. I had to, in the beginning, of my sobriety, people would say, get down on your knees at night and ask God for help to keep you away from a drink, blah, 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 blah. And I did that by rote for a long time. And then when I started to see myself acting in sobriety, that were my survival skills, which I think are my, obviously my defects of character. That was not a good thing. You can't, I couldn't do that in sobriety, or else I was going to probably drink, And I had to go to something, and I didn't have any resources to throw at it. I didn't have a lot of money to make it go away. I didn't, I couldn't buffer. I had to go through that suffering. And then eventually, it would come through different inventories that I did. Because when I did inventories, I was in trouble. And I knew that if I had picked up these tools and then did a fifth step with my sponsor, and then do the next 2, 3, 4 steps and make amends eventually, that something would come in. And it always did. It was internal for me. Everything that I experienced up until this day has been internal. And then, of course, the big boom 4 years ago when Jack died, I said, holy God, now what? I'm not going to make this one. I can't do this. And I did. I went back to basics all by myself during COVID lockdowns in my house. How the hell how do you become a widow? How do you do? I don't know how to do any of that. It was like I was in this huge cloud of unknowing. I didn't know. So I went back to what I knew, and that was my books and praying and just saying, God, if you're there, you got to show me. Now that meant I needed to get a bigger God than I had 4 years prior to this, you know, when he was not sick. I had to get, and I hid behind him a lot, to be honest with you. He was like the guy. And he'd come home at night from work and he'd say, do you want to go to a meeting? We're going to go. I'd say, no, you go ahead. I'll be all right. And I kind of wanted my own little space, to be honest with you. But I can see that. And, you know, I wonder, I have no idea about this, but I've often thought, well, he died because he was sick. Now we know that, but there was a huge lesson for me in that. I had to do something or I was going to die. And every time I've thought about Jack Donahoe in the last 4 years, and I want to go to that place where I think I'm just going to drown, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And I want to scream and yell. It does not happen. And so I move on and I do the next thing, whatever that is. I clean the cat box, or someone will call me, or I'll go out and buy groceries or whatever. It's just, I know there's a presence in me. I know that God is watching over me. And I get little things every day. I ask him for everything every day. I ask him for parking spaces and I get one. You know, now maybe someday I won't, but you know what I mean? It's silly. It's childish, but it's very personal to me. I believe there's a power. I wouldn't be here. Why am I in AA? Why didn't I die? Why didn't my kids, you know? Anyway, that's a long roundabout. I hope that helps, Sam. It's just so personal. But I believe it. People used to say, believe that I believe. I said, okay. Back in the day.
I think for myself on this, Miss and Sam, I hear you on that. I was not raised with a religion, so I didn't have to get rid of a religion. That's number one. But I was told that I had to believe in something greater than myself when I came in here. Prior to coming in here, there was a spiritual thing that I witnessed, a healing with a relative in my family. And when I witnessed that, there was no reason, rationale, or logic that was connected with that. Now, I didn't know that at that time. It was a miraculous healing, which, you know, doctors weren't doing or anything else, but I witnessed it. So I knew there was a God, but I didn't think it belonged to me. I thought it belonged to the family member. And so, because I wasn't worthy of that. So when I came in this program and my sponsor would say something to me like, take my God, it's working for me. And I would, because I could see that. You know, that's the first thing that we do is we start to see some of our elders in this program and so forth. And we see the spirit with them and we know that something's working for them, something going on. And so one of the things that I do, and it's because of my experience, is that I had to ask myself, when I read that Bill story, you know, he turned all things into his newfound friend. I sat there one day, I was 20 years sober. And I remember I said, do I believe God is a friend? I remember all by myself sitting on the couch and really pondering that, not just intellectually banging around, so to speak. And as I was thinking about that, what is a friend anyways? It was an energy. That's what I realized. It's an energy, because Missy and I don't see each other often. Before Zoom and Skype, we didn't see as much of each other as we do now. But there was an energy if the phone rang. You ever, you know, gee, I got a call and the phone rings at a church. It's like an energy that was there. And I said, wow, that's so interesting. So I had to ponder that a little bit. And at that moment, I had a cat, and the cat's name was E.T. And I remember I was sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden E.T. jumped up in my lap. And I looked down at the cat, and that cat loved me. There was an energy about that cat. Loved me when I go to bed at night, would tap me on the cheek until I opened the covers and would curl up on my stomach. And that cat was present, even though I didn't want it present at all the time. And all of a sudden I went, huh. And all that cat did, all animals ever do, is give unconditional love. You know, that's really one of the most purest loves that there is. We have a newcomer. Missy, I want you to know that the newcomer tonight has a cat. You weren't on because you were late. And the cat was present, and the cat's name is Missy.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, well, it's a good thing. That cat she's had for 18 years and has given her a whole bunch of love, correct? I don't mean that sarcastically, I mean it nicely. And so what happened for me is, as I started where I was, start where you are. Where do you feel safe and connected? That's the question I ask every single person. Where have you felt safe and connected? Have you ever had a moment where all of a sudden you just, wow. It could be when you saw, it was this weekend, watching that little doe outside my window. You know, it was just an energy for 1 second that I stopped. The view there is, if you can't think there's anything else up there, my God, it's profound. I live in a place that's profound. I'm now back home here in Santa Fe, and I left a yard with all the things I loved, a smoke tree and an apple tree and a rose bush. And I want to tell you, Heather has enhanced the beauty of that with such God-given art. It's miraculous. It's like a little sacred place. There's an energy that happens. But you know that if you ever had a spiritual thing happen to you, there's no reason, there's no logic or rationale, it just happens. And nobody, I don't care what it is, from people after, you know, a lot of people die and a lot of people get a visit from whoever they've died. People will say, oh, that's, yeah. If that was a spiritual thing for you, you'll never forget it, will you? That's yours. I don't care what anybody else thinks. So that's how I grew with this thing. I have spiritual God zaps that have happened to me along my path. And I keep putting them into this bubble of energy. And each one I rely on. And so that I continue to, it's wonderful to rely on Missy and everybody else. But if I don't get a connection with this presence to rely on, I die. I die. I need that energy. I don't know how you get it. It's kind of like Missy. I think you get it from experience. So I don't say the God of my understanding. If I understood God, I'd be God. I have no idea what God is, but I have an experience with something. And nobody's going to take that away from me. I don't care what you rationally think you're going to tell me. I know that presence is present. I know it's here, and I do believe we're all connected to it. I do believe that the real purpose here is not to be with personas, but to be with the souls. And I think we can reach them. I really do. Thanks. I don't know if that helps, Sam, but good luck. God's after you, so keep going after him, because he'll reveal himself to you.
Thanks so much. Barbara, you have your hand. We'd love to hear from you.
My name's Barbara. I'm an alcoholic. Now that I'm crying, I wish I hadn't raised my hand. In fact, when I first heard about emotional sobriety, however long ago that was, I thought that meant you couldn't cry in meetings. And my first 9 months in AA, I cried every dang meeting. So it was confusing. 30 some years ago when I was getting started, I had a therapist who said to me that, this is what the tears were about, that there was a group of strong women waiting for me. I just needed to show up. And these two ladies are a start of that very strong group of women that I'm being introduced to. And so I am beyond grateful, because they're good teachers just by their example. One thing I love is you're just who you are. You may have moments of turning on a persona, I don't know, but mostly, it's just, there's a part of you that's average, and that's a compliment from me, in my mind, because when I got sober, I would have told you I was fabulous, and there was that couldn't have been further from the truth. So maybe for me, average means just, steady. I really don't know what it means, but in my heart, it means I believe you. I can trust you, because you're not in any way manipulating me or trying to hurt me. And that has you know, that's grown over the years, but I've never had it like I have it today. And so I'm grateful for that. I just want to say this because I didn't let a higher power in until 3.5 years. And then I began to see my higher power in hindsight, that's how I got to AA, that, you know, so many examples. But I think the first time I listened to my higher power was I didn't have a sponsor, and because I had separated from her 9 months earlier, and I had asked 3 women, and they all had a lot of time, and none of them were sponsoring anymore. And I was desperate because I didn't even know. I don't think I was doing things that were going to keep me alive. I wasn't drinking, but I was desperate. And Mary Thayer was at a meeting, and I never saw her before, and she quoted my favorite line from the Big Book, and she was standing about 2 feet away from me after the meeting, and I said, "Excuse me, but I need a sponsor, and I'm wondering if you are open to, you know, talking to me about that." And she said, you know, kind of like, "Why?" I don't know exactly what she said, but the thing was, I kept getting the message. I got it at least 3 times. "Ask her," and I said no. And I asked her, no. So the 3rd time I just blurted this out, and she has, you know, through her working through her higher power and other people, I feel like the only time I feel desperate is if I'm not letting my higher power in. It's the complete opposite of where I was. And so I'm really profoundly grateful that these women are in my life, and that I'm teachable, because I know, you know, it took me a long time to understand why people with, you know, 30, 40 plus years still went to meetings. I thought, they got this. You know, there's 12 things, you write them down, whatever. And now I understand it is about the soul. It's got nothing to do with what I think. It has everything to do with how through me, I learn how to treat people better, situations differently. I can love with an open heart. I might get hurt. It's okay. I guess that's all I want to say. I thank you both. God, you know, every day is a new opportunity for me to see that what I was doing isn't working anymore. And how fortunate am I for that? Because I held on to those things, you know, with iron fists. I really thought they kept me safe. And of course they did the opposite. So thank you both for giving your time and your experience, because, you know, it changed me, and I know that we can multiply that times probably thousands. So thank you both. I love you.
Thanks, Barbara. Sarah, I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Sarah, alcoholic. Mary, Missy. Oh God, this meeting always just what I needed to hear, just the God's grace I needed to witness. I can't thank you enough. Missy, you said some things that really hit home with me tonight. I just lost my husband in February, and I know that, you know, it was the stupidest thing. I was at the doctor's office, and I had to change my information from married to widow. And it broke my heart, and I didn't know how to do that. And I said, how do I be a widow? I don't know how to be a widow. What do I do? And I remembered my sponsor always telling me, you just be the best, whatever you have to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I heard her voice in my head saying, you just be the best widow you can be in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you share your experience, strength, and hope, whatever that may be. And every day since Mark died, every single day, not a day has gone by when I haven't felt more of God's presence than I ever felt before. Every day there has been something that happened. And I kid you not, one day there was something bad that happened. And one of my neighbors had come over, and through a series of events, he tried to rip me off. And, he thinks I'm the widow all alone, and or I don't know what he thought. And I didn't know this neighbor. I mean, I just, I didn't know him at all. I just kind of met him, and, and then wouldn't you know it, that with not very emotionally sober, when this happened, I focused on that for about 2 weeks. I addressed it, and I talked to him, and I said, that wasn't the deal we made. He'd taken a lawnmower along with some other stuff that he had bought for me. And I called him up, and I told him, I said, that wasn't part of our deal. He showed up on my porch after he'd moved everything out of my machine shed and said, yeah, I came and picked up the scooter and the this and the that and the lawnmower. And I said, the lawnmower? He goes, yeah, that was part of our deal. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And you talk about that fear. And I'm thinking, I'm a widow living alone in the country, and what do I do with that? And I let it go. And then a few days later, I called him up, and I told him that that wasn't our deal. And so you make a fair offer. And he did not make a fair offer. And I said, well, you need to return it then. And I gave him, he returned stuff. I gave him all his money back, and I said, I want nothing to do with you. But in the meantime, I focused on that for like 2 weeks. I had this resentment, and I focused on that. And I'm thinking, I don't focus on that negative stuff. I don't do that. And all that stuff that's been happening for me every day, it was like I lost the focus of that. And through a little bit of mini inventory and stuff like that, I was able to walk through that and think, God is showing me every day what I need to be seeing. Why am I focused on the one negative thing that has happened, other than Mark dying? Obviously, that was the most negative thing. But, why am I focusing on that? And it was that part of me that wants to go back to the intellectual, the academic, and look for an answer in the book that's going to explain it to me. You do step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's it, and then, without the emotional participation. And so without paying attention, and without, saying, okay, and then I was reminded of the time that I told my sponsor there was somebody that I didn't really like at the meeting, and she told me to go sit next to her, and okay. So it's like the one negative thing is the one thing I'm going to focus on out of everything else in the world. And my husband always used to say to me, Sarah, start your day over. And I thought that was the stupidest thing I had ever heard. Start your day over, Sarah. And then, when we were first sober, that really sounded stupid. But then I started to learn, when I stopped being so academic and intellectual about it, that, when I bring in the emotional sobriety and the participation with God, and I look at God as a friend, I think it's my friend, and, the solution to all my problems, the answer to all my questions, when I look at God that way, there's a difference that I see in God. And I realize that I start my day with prayer. To start my day over, all I need to do is pray. I would think, I've already gotten everything done today. I've got this stuff done today. Now I'm all in a tizzy about something, and God knows what it is. And, he said, say, start your day over. It's like, and throughout every day that since he passed, I keep being reminded of start your day over, Sarah. If it's not going well, I don't need to get a bigger God. My God just keeps getting bigger every day, because I have had that faith and that trust and that belief. And I'm saying, and leaving less claw marks in the things that I'm letting go of, and just saying, okay, here I am, God, what would you have me do? And reporting for duty every day, because the prayers that carry the most weight and are of the rarest beauty are those in which we don't demand, but just report for duty. Let me do that. You guys showed me God's grace tonight, and I'm really grateful for that. I don't know how to do anything without God. I don't know how to be a widow without God. But if I add God, I know how to be a widow. I know how to suit up and show up and share my experience, strength, and hope about being a widow with other women who are going through the same thing that I'm going through. And I was reminded just the other day that God didn't take Mark from me. He received Mark. So somebody told me that the other day. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Sarah, thanks so much for And everyone, thank you. I kind of want to just keep going for another half hour. We're at the time, we want to be faithful to the time that we have. Before I close it up, I just want to say both to Missy and Mary, I traveled to England recently and toured several cathedrals in Great Britain. And I remember part of one of the tours, they talked about the impact of the Enlightenment, particularly during the 18th century, the Enlightenment upon the Anglican Church and really the church across Europe, about how the center of spirituality moved to the mind and the Enlightenment, and that really all of Christendom moved upward and into the head. And I suffer from that so much that I just keep looking for the information that's going to just help me fix this thing. And I just want to say everything you said tonight, really, a lot of God vibrations for me just resonated to what I experienced in England, just a reminding me of that this is not a mind thing. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is a movement of the spirit. And I also just want to say that, as you quoted Richard Rohr, another book he wrote, Falling Upward to Spirituality, The Two Halves of Life. He says that in our modern society, we lack elders. And it's not that we lack older people, and being an elder is not about chronological age, but it's about the willingness to walk with others and to mentor and to elder people. And I just want to say, this has nothing to do with chronology or years, but you've eldered us tonight, and you are our elders. And I'm grateful for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's lovely.
So as we close this meeting, we go into our inner room. We offer a prayer of our choice or just our still, and then we'll come back and thank our speakers. All right. Thank you so much, Misty and Mary,